over on this side, in the back, and I think we're out of seats, but we can share. So thank you all for coming this morning. Show of hands, who is this your first time here today? Wow, very cool. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. Quick rundown of the event. We have 2 startups that are presenting. They get a 6-minute PowerPoint presentation to help educate you on the product or service that they provide, followed up by a 20-minute Q&A with you guys, the audience, to give them ideas they maybe never thought about, different industries they can get within. So it's a really great event to be a part of, and thank you guys again for coming. If, again, this is your first time, we do have a sign-up sheet in the corner where you can hear about the upcoming presentations that are coming along, as well as gives you the opportunity to give feedback to the presenters as well, real time. So they really appreciate all of that direct feedback where you can give them some advice. So I highly encourage you guys to do that. So today up first, we have Christine with Individualized Education. Please give her a round of applause.
Filled with excitement. Unfortunately, that excitement was almost instantaneously deflated as I realized that my staff and my administration spoke only about test scores. And as I vocalized my disgust and that test scores had absolutely nothing to do with real learning, I was looked at and told that I was crazy. I'd like to ask you to take a moment and envision an important child in your life and just hold them with you for the next 30 minutes. We don't have time today to discuss everything that's wrong with our current system, but I think that we can all agree that what's happening in our classrooms is not what our children deserve. Our current system eliminates creativity, does not take into account how individual each child is, and has completely obscure indicators of what constitutes success, leaving very little passion and drive for teachers and students alike, which ultimately does not allow our kids to achieve their potential. What they won't have you believe is that the solution is very simple. With individualized education, we eliminate all of those restricting factors, and kids not only learn a basic curriculum, but they actually apply those in addition to learning real-world skills that they'll use in their adult lives. A student starts with their passion in mind, a qualified teacher designs a curriculum around that passion, and then not only do they learn together, they actually get out into the community and connect with experts in those similar fields. If we simply allow ourselves to think about the process of learning, you'll see that it can happen anywhere, so why restrict it to just a classroom? And the benefits are enormous. No matter if your child is a child who gets things on the first try and is ready for new information, or if it's a child who needs things explained to them a few different times in a few different ways, both children can get what they need and progress and excel at their own rate with no frustration. And I think we can relate as adults. When you're doing something that you're interested in, your natural drive and curiosity and enthusiasm come along for that ride. And with the world that we live in today, we literally have unlimited amounts of information at our fingertips, so why be subjected to an outdated textbook and limited around that? We know that this works, so you can Google any statistics on homeschooling to see that it's effective. So my model is similar to that. And take Reese Bush, for example. She's a local 16-year-old Florida girl who just completed her undergraduate degree 1 week prior to completing her high school diploma. And there are some teachers in this room who the philosophy makes sense, but if not, just use your common sense. How do you learn as an adult? Do you sit back in the corner of a room, read a textbook by yourself, complete worksheets on the same topic for weeks on end, and then take a test on it? I hope not, unless somebody else is telling you to do it that way. And the good news is that parents are ready for this change. They're frustrated with the system. They don't know necessarily how to make it work any better, but when they hear about this opportunity, they're excited about it. So, meet Brock, and my former 10-year-old student of mine who's here today. We worked together in just 10-hour-long sessions this summer to put this into practice so you could actually see how it works. We started off by just creating a mind map together and narrowed down his passion into robotics. So he decided that he wanted to create a robot that actually helps people and solves real-world problems. So we accessed some resources together and learned about graphene and biomimetics, college-level stuff for a 10-year-old. And then we decided who helps people the most. And he decided that he wanted to reach out to the police department. So he drafted an email, set up an interview. He actually had time to answer those interview questions and then also take a look at some of the robotics that they use in their career and also some problems. So he actually created a prototype that solves a real-world He learned basic programming, he learned what a hexadecimal is, and he even gave him his college level textbook, something that he wouldn't get in a 4th grade classroom. Then we reached out because we had to make it work. So we reached out to 2 engineers who were 1,200 miles away and learned it a different way. We just Skyped with them and they were still able to share their expertise. Then we met with a local veterinarian because animals is also a passion of Brock's, and he shared with us real life experiences, how he went in after Katrina and cleaned up the aftermath, and how a robot could potentially have helped them in those situations. And then we partnered up with Mark and Alex, who helped us create a prototype using a 3D printer where he actually used a CAD program. And the 10 sessions went pretty quickly, so he has the tools to actually create a working model in the future, but hasn't done it just yet. So at the end of our 10 sessions, he actually reflected on his own learning and decided how he wanted to share the information with his friends and family. So he put together a presentation, shared it in a comfortable environment with his friends and family, and did not need a test to showcase his learning and his creativity. So what's in it for you? If you're a business owner, or you're somebody who's about to get a colleague on board, who do you want to work with? Somebody who's been sitting in a restrictive environment for the last 15 to 20 years of their lives, wasting time and maybe completing activities that they see as a waste of time? Or somebody who has this 1 million cups attitude where you want to create, you want to connect, you want to help support each other to do things that you're passionate about? And think again on that student that child that you imagined at the beginning of this presentation. What do you want for them? I don't think this should be limited to just adults after they've completed a college degree. And I think we've been doing the same thing for so long because we don't know any better. Well, here's another option that can work better, and it's up to us to make the decision for the future generations. I just want to address 2 types of people who might be in this room today. There's people who see potential. They're creative visionaries. They're people who may not necessarily go with the flow, maybe called different, and maybe even crazy at some point in their life. But they go on to create industries that we can't imagine living without. And then there's another group of people who see an existing industry and know that it can work better. And I hope to be that person with education in this program. And that's why I think being called crazy is a compliment. Yeah.
I just want to compliment you on your presentation. It was fantastic.
Thank you. I will disclose, I know you're not supposed to do this, but a room full of kids bring it on. A room full of adults, not my happy place. So thank you for that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, again, her lovely presentation.
Thank you.
How does is this augmenting the current school system, and this is an adjunct to something they can do to get that non-traditional learning environment?
Sure. So I've had this idea for a very long time. However, I haven't really understood how it could work. So I did some research this past year on the requirements for homeschooling. So how it would work is your student would just enroll as a homeschooled student, which is a very simple letter to the superintendent. They approve it, and then you would pay a tuition to kind of essentially be enrolled in the program.
Are you interested in partnerships?
Yes, so in 2 different ways. Based on the feedback that I received, so I have a few family members in the audience today and their kids who I've worked with. I just shared this with a small group of families who I trusted and I think get the potential of their kids that aren't being achieved. 7. All 7 of them said, let's do this. So the realistic scope for me is to handle 5 to 7 like-minded kids, but I also have co-teachers in the audience who I think embody that same philosophy, and so the potential to partner is there. Yes?
So, I want to say first, I want to be a huge supporter,
Yeah.
but this county, we have 100,000 students in this county. You just said they pay tuition to participate. Does that mean out of those 100,000, and there's a huge segment of that that are currently, let's say, low performing, we read all the time about the F schools,
Yep.
et cetera. It seems to me, is this going to exclude those low performing students from this who, we need to raise that, that lower part of the bell curve needs to come up. Help me with how
Sure.
we
So I
put
worked
that.
at 3 very diverse schools, one of which was that underperforming group that you're talking about. And one of the reasons I'm here is I don't think it should be exclusive of those kids. Those kids, when you show them that you care and that they do have potential, make the biggest turnaround. So why I'm here is to consider the potential for sponsorship opportunities. So if there's community members who are interested in sponsoring a child, then they would too be able to be a part of that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a previous homeschooler,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate what you're doing. It's fantastic. I have one warning for you. When you move children out of a structured school, and then you expect them to be independent in
even in that, I have my undergrad, I have my master's, I've worked with kids for 8 years now. You understand, and I was sharing this with Lori earlier, you may have a perception of how things will go, but understanding that you can only work around what that individual child provides for you and taking them from that point. So Brock, I work with this summer, and don't mean to embarrass you, put you in the spot, but he's a gamer and he's into technology. So of course, I'm thinking big how this could happen. We could use Google Docs, we could do things electronically, but when I met with him the first time, he explained that he was more comfortable just doing what he's comfortable with, the sitting down and meeting one-on-one. So had I had him for another 10 sessions, I think we could have gotten there. But knowing how kids work and how you scale them up to that, I totally understand it's not going to be instantaneous. Yes, ma'am.
After they graduate or any kind of majorment that you have,
Yes.
and if they want to move on and go to college,
Sure.
like any normal kids do they still have to pass SAT or what kind of certificate or degree?
So I'm starting with our local community. If I get there, that'd be great. But the requirements to get into a college are simply to apply. GPA is one indicator of success, but you also have to produce products. So if I have the same student for 5 to 10 years, we're consistently producing products that can be maintained and presented as showcasing learning in a different way. So there's definitely still potential, and the benefit is the county, and I'll speak for Pinellas County only because that's what I've researched, they dictate how many minutes you have to teach every day. So for a 4th grader, we have to teach 90 minutes of reading with an additional 30 minutes of intervention time, 60 minutes of writing, which is not necessary, quite frankly. When you're working with a small group, essentially, you can knock out that same lesson, not spend 4 weeks on it, and then keep on going. So ideally, we're moving beyond what's expected in the traditional sense, so why can't I go on to spend additional time filling out applications with him or putting together scholarship programs and that kind of thing? Yes.
How are you envisioning the facility or your actual, how they're coming together with the teachers?
Great question. So at this point, like any other business member, if you can start with 0 debt, that's what I'm trying to do. So at this point, we can learn anywhere that you can gain information and create something. So for Brock and I this summer, for example, we met at his home. I'm open to opening up my home. We can meet at a coffee shop. There were plenty of plugs for Kawa in there for you. We can meet at a public library. So this facility is not necessarily something that we're holding back at this point. Would I love to, in a few years, have a space where parents could all come and have a meeting point and have a googly space, not necessarily like a structured classroom? I think that's definitely a possibility for the future. Yes.
How do you scale this up? It seems like a one-man business, you got to
Yeah.
talk about.
So that's
Business model, how do you scale?
That's why I'm here. I will be the first one to say that I've got education down. I can answer any of those questions. But I'm also here to create connections with the business community because that's not what teachers are taught. We're not encouraged to go that extra step and learn that. So over the summer, have I done my own investigation? Sure. But would I love to connect with somebody who's got that, already got that line of thinking and partner up with that? Absolutely. Sorry.
I may have missed this because of the tweets.
That's okay.
How does this work? I heard you talk about how it works with homeschooling, but like my child would love this, but he is so social that homeschooling will never ever work for him to go drive class.
So, okay, and let me go back one. So when you register your student as a homeschooled student, you have the opportunity to teach them in any way that you choose. So essentially, I'm taking that off your plate. I'm doing the teaching. You're still bringing them to another outlet. What was the first part of your question again?
I was just wondering how
Social
it works.
implications.
Yeah.
So I think that as adults, we have this very big stereotype that just because you're in a classroom, that you're getting socialized properly. But realistically, when you watch kids, they draw themselves to like-minded individuals, just like we do as adults. Just because you live on a block and you have 50 neighbors, doesn't mean that you socialize with a neighbor who's necessarily got the horrible lawn and baby is doing illegal activity. They naturally pull themselves together. So that was just a random example. I don't really but to counter, I think the basic nature of children is that they want to work together. They want to help each other. So the 5 to 7 like-minded kids is where that socialization would come into play. And then also when you're connecting with community members, you're learning that socialization faster than you would in a classroom anyways, for realistic implications, I guess. Yes.
I've got 2 kids in college,
Yeah.
so being there for the prep, sure the classroom was very structured, and no, one of my children did not do very well in
Yeah.
a traditionally structured classroom.
Sure.
The question is, how do you envision this is going to prepare them for the transition when they do go to a college and it gets back into structured program, but definitely more structured than this program.
Okay, so two different, and I guess what isn't shown in the pictures is that we were only trying this because I know that I can design a curriculum. We didn't have the time with that. I wanted to see if community members indeed wanted to help children as much as I thought. So there wasn't much curriculum work for this. But when you're meeting with kids every day, there is a structure and there is a curriculum. It may not be what's mandated, it may be what they need, but they're still receiving those services. And then in terms of the rigor of the college, is that what you said? The rigor is still there, it's just in a different setting. And I think to go maybe even more idealistic is who's to say that they haven't figured out by the age of 16 what their company is going to be, and they might not even need college. So like Joe Schleppy, who we saw 2 weeks ago, who was encouraged to be a self-starter as a junior in high school, has his own company. He's putting college on the back burner. Imagine if he started that 15 years prior.
Are you familiar with Odyssey of the Mind? And
I feel like it's familiar, but tell me more.
it's a program that actually holds a group of kids together, and they actually solve a very structured, complex thing, and they're required to do all the design, the setup, the investigation, the acting, the whole thing, and then they do presentations. And it's very similar to, helping them learn how to work together. I think it would be an excellent way to possibly partner up
Yeah.
and see, because it's international.
Yeah.
And,
Is that the same that we were talking about?
No.
Okay. So I think the natural progression, again, that slide that said the structure of learning, if we just consider that, it's a continuously moving process. So just because it's dictated one way doesn't mean we can't do it a different way. And just to throw it out there, I tried to partner with TED Talks, and even their structure for what they want you to do with the kids is still very concrete. You can't go far from it. So I would like to find something that would be a good fit.
My question is to you is that you told me to think of a child, and I did my nephew.
Yes.
And then I challenge everybody to think that high school is not as grand as we all.
Agreed. Agreed.
For me.
Agreed. For a majority.
I'd rather be home instead of being thrown in a locker. Anyway, what I'm saying, and my question to you is I see that you're dealing with someone who's dealing with robotics, but I have a very young nephew, and he's showing huge creative potential. Is there a creative side to your learning
This
as well?
whole thing is creative, and I talk fast and I'm nervous, so maybe I glazed over it, but the point of this is that the creativity is limited in school. That's what we need to get to, and I think we all understand that when you're designing something. So if there's a young lady who's interested in art, then we study through that. So a natural talent, I think, of teachers is you can see a piece of artwork and you can link a math lesson, or you can link a science lesson, or you can adapt curriculum around an interest.
I've already taught him how to create a color wheel. So he just turned
So
4.
you're going to be part of my last slide. Yes, so to open it up to kids' interests, and I think the basic nature of children, and this could go, if it's developed early, it's as old as you want it to go, but they naturally care for other people and want to help other people. So if he wants to study robotics for a little bit, then we all do it to help him achieve his goal. If she wants to go on and study art, then we change and shift. So it's constantly, it's fluid, I guess is a better way to say it.
Do you need community members?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Do you need community members to volunteer
Yes.
in their professional expertise?
You're a step ahead of the game. So another reason that I'm here is that we did this with Brock based on my connections only. And I didn't think I had anybody who was interested in robotics, but that came out. So part of what I'm here for is to extend the offer and the invitation that if you have an expertise in something, kids want to learn about it. And if you even just have 30 minutes that you can Skype, or if you can just 20 minutes to come and sit down with a kid, that makes a difference in their learning, not just looking at a worksheet all the time.
Is this all one-on-one, or do you have groups together?
So ideally it's 5 to 7 to address the socialization like she was saying, but they have to be like-minded. So age is irrelevant. So if you have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old and there's similar skills and abilities, of course the challenge is going to naturally offset each other, but if it's a 3-year-old who can't even recite the alphabet, they're obviously not going to be in a group with a 12-year-old. So at this point, 5 to 7 like-minded.
I'm already sold. I wish I had this.
That's what everybody wants to hear.
So now I want to know about how much it costs.
Sure. So it's tough to put a price on a child and their future and their education. So what I did is I just researched the local private schools because that's a similar model, and they range from anywhere for a tuition rate annual $8,000 to 15 or 16, and I was told from the parents that that number is even a little low. So based on the additional services and the extra time that you get, I created a sliding scale at this point from 12 to 16,000 based on the age and the services that your child would need.
Outside of a child being sponsored, what other funding could they get in order, are there scholarships?
Well, at this point, I'm here to learn. So, I mean, realistically, if we had a mom who went out into her own community and said, I'm fundraising for this, I'm open to that. And again, I'm open to any other avenues that you guys can provide. What was it?
I have a question about that.
Sure. Oh, sorry.
I think it's a great program, and I wish I was 10 years old. I enjoy it, but no. Anyway, my thing is, we both think this way all the time, and it's so big. So, what about liability? What things, precautions are you taking, insurance and all that?
So I'm working with, I just had a basic liability policy for the summer, but I've also partnered with a lawyer who's going to help me with that back end as well. Yes.
So, I once taught school for a little while. I identified with
Yes.
your issues that you had there. And since then, just observing, one of the things that I notice is a real delineator in education is situations where you have a majority, an overwhelming majority of parents who really care, sort of in a physical, we're somehow involved, even just asking your kids if they did their homework.
Yes.
And those who don't.
Yes.
Is there anything in your future to address kids who have parents who just really aren't that concerned about it?
So in the school system, you're saying, or in what?
In your.
So how would I address parents?
Do you have any thought of that, or any way to address? I mean, we've talked about sponsorship, but that's more for kids who have a financial need,
Sure.
but involved and parents who are focused on education. But
Sure. So there's two parts to that, I think. The first is that you will be very hard pressed to consult a mom or a dad who will look you in the face and say that I don't care about my child.
say it, yes.
Yes. No, and I agree.
It's the doing. It's the doing.
But plenty of other factors that relate to that and maybe why they're at a certain point in their life. But I've also considered, I have a soft spot in my heart for elderly people, so I'm curious to hear what you have to say. But a partnership between maybe senior care facilities. I watched a TED Talk where they had a computer that they dropped into the middle of nowhere, programmed it with DNA that spoke English, and the kids who learned didn't speak any English at all. So they pretty much self-taught. And then the next time around they did it, and then they had like a village elder just partner with that kid and just say, good job, and kind of encourage them in that route. So I think there's plenty of resources here in our county where people are looking to make connections, they just don't know how. So I guess at this point, I can't fix parental problems, but I think I can make connections to other community members that are willing to help. Does that answer your question?
Well, you're thinking in that direction.
Yes.
That's kind of my question.
Sure.
And the connection between elderly people who maybe need some type of
Yes.
connection and have experiences, that could be fantastic.
And
So
again, that expertise is hidden. I think we have facades up that they are not experts in certain things, but indeed, they can help out.
If you look at any program concerning, you answered one question about the elderly. How about a learning defense?
Help me understand what you mean.
Developmental defense.
Would I be able to work with them, or would they be able to partner?
No, in your program, work with them.
So I am not qualified, and I think I was talking with Lori earlier. There's people in the world who are certified in autistic or PSOL, speaking of other languages. I am certified in K through 5 and had my certification in middle school science and math. But I think logistically, since I've completed my undergrad and my master's, I can take children along that route. I don't have a specialization that I would want to harm a child in that process by saying, yes, let's do it when I don't have that certification. There's other people that do, and if that partnership comes along, then sure, but I don't want to take it on. Sure.
I have a question, I have a comment.
Thank you.
I am Brock's mom, who Christine Lorenzi worked with over the summer. So he's in elementary school, and can I just see a show of hands of how many people here have children in public school elementary right now? All right, let me tell you what's going on. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I just want you to hear a real world vision of what's happening. You have tremendous teachers. They may as well come to school completely bound in gaffer tape. They are, like Christine said, they are restricted to a mandated curriculum. If Brock shows even a hint of, I am so digging math, well, I'm sorry, Brock, we need to move on now, because now I gotta get my social studies in, and now I've gotta do this. But now I want you to envision this classroom of 22 children. You have boys and you have girls. I'm gonna tell it like it is.